Have you been working from home in the past 2 months?
I have. In fact, we call 100% working from home since the beginning of March. So it has been more than 2 months.
I see. But is it more effective? Not having to spend your time on the road and get stuck in traffic jams.
I have to admit, it was very effective until my kids start to study from home, and then I need to adjust everything over again. But overall, I think there are the parts that we can become much more effective, meaning that I have been able to attend a lot more meetings, and there's no sort of physical limitations of moving between meetings. So in a way, I get to observe the dynamics and the work of the team much more seamlessly and much more effectively throughout. Also, it really highlights how we should work, particularly in a meeting arrangement to make it much more effective, meaning that we have to be much more prepared. There will be a daily briefing every day, and then everyone has to prepare what they want to brief less than 15 minutes every morning, for example. So that's requires some discipline. The part that's not so effective, probably through collaborative work, when we want to discuss something new or something creative, that would still require an equipment or a software that facilitate that, and that has not been in the market yet.
Yeah. And Dr. Sutapa, perhaps you can share with us a little bit of the project that you just initiated during COVID-19, sharing project through application to help people who have difficult situation during this time.
Right. Well, in fact, it's a small project that we work together with some of the staff in my company and also with other volunteers outside of the company. We call it a Chatbot Bangbang. You can add. It works on a line chatbot by adding BANGPUNN. The main idea is to become a platform where people who wants to donate can announce their donation on a platform, and people who are would require those donations, or people who know the people who would require those donations, would be able to search donation spots in their area. The idea is very simple. We use Line because it's being adopted easily by people with much less technology savviness, and also we now partner with a lot of other community restaurants where people who would want to do donations but don't have the time to cook, they can actually order food from those community restaurants and have it delivered to the nearby communities for donation.
So that's very.
Go ahead, please.
Sorry. So that's very good aspect of using technology in improving people's situation, especially during this crisis. So from now on, how do you see the role of technology in our daily life, its implication in daily life, in social life? Will we have to adapt more and use technology more? What's your vision in the future of Thailand?
Well, I certainly feel that we have to adapt to the fast pace of technology even before COVID hit. But in some way, it escalates the adoption. And it has been escalated adoption by the state as much as by the concern for healthcare. Meaning that with the lockdown, a lot more companies will start to experiment, or in fact, they didn't have time to experiment. They have to adopt the technologies even before they felt ready. But this is without silver lining. As you can see, now employers realize that they can ask employees to work from home. They can even save office space, but also, the people with physical disabilities that prevent them from commute daily now would have a chance because it has been proven possible that they can work from home and still be a good contributor to the workplace.
No, Sutapa, we all know, we all know how devastating this pandemic has been on the world, right? And it's unfortunate that many people have died and have become sick. But I'm sure that there must be some positive side to this pandemic. So, for you, what do you think is the most positive side to this outbreak?
Well, it's not yet over, and it's a very difficult question because it's as economists, we seem to gravitate towards the negative side of this devastating event that's unfold, and it's not the end of it. I doubt if we have seen the peak of the economic calamities that will be coming after that. But the one thing is very clear. These pandemics or any kind of crisis help highlight the problem or the loophole or an underlying issues that we could have solved before that, but we didn't have the time when the market is good to actually look closely at the efficiency of our operations. So this is the time to look back into all the steps that we could have improved and emerge from it. But when you talk about whether this pandemic will be different from other, the economic crisis will be different from other, it's really difficult to predict because if you look back at a lot of economic crises in modern history, in modern economics, they were not caused by widespread disease like that. Instead, it was physical or death crises. So this time is very different, and people are grapple to understand the impact because it's for the first time it hits nearly every country in the world all at once. And one thing that's for sure, we will come off of this crisis with heightened public debt, the level of which we had not experienced before. So for rich countries, for developed countries, low interest rate with deflation will persist for a long time afterwards, but it will be manageable. But it will not be the case for less developed countries. So, so public debts will weaken the ability for the countries to manage their own economy. Then we'll see the rising fiscal deficits. So austerity will not and cannot return for a long time, and then we will see tax rise in response. The scary part is the government will no longer honor the old social contract, especially in terms of the social safety net, and they will be discarded and new one will be forced in violently. This will test the strength and the trust between the governments, the regime, and its citizens. So these are some of the major economic outlook that we see from the public side. On the private side, though, we certainly will see the rising private debt and also a surge in default. That would definitely weaken the monetary policy instruments to help solve the problem after long after this crisis is over. And as you mentioned early on about the workforce, it will be under intense pressure as unemployment will remain high even after the pandemic. And this decline in employment will be concentrated in a labor intensive industries. The case in point is the hospitality business. Because it's being a prime example because it cannot be done from home. It's currently filled with the young, women, and immigrants. So these marginalized groups will become even further more vulnerable after this crisis.
So what do you like to reckon, especially for hospitality business in which women have to concentrate and work a lot in this sector? The government should do more to try to take care of workers in this sector?
If we look at the measures that the government has done so far, I know there's a lot of policy discussions being on the table, but if you look at what the government has done so far, it's not even the stimulus. It's just a stabilizer. They just want to put cash in the hands of those being affected. And this is done with brute force. It's have to be accessed easily with not a lot of conditions. Otherwise, very confusing, as we have seen the hiccups in the past month. But going forward, government would have to look at the employment scheme that help the companies solve the debt problem, and also have a massive employment for public goods. If you look at the Pakistani government, we have heard that they, and I also applaud their effort in hiring thousands of laborers being affected, being out of job by the lockdown, to plant trees, and we can adopt similar programs. So we can look at the technology as Thai language technology has a lot of public goods that is not there. And so we can do a lot of programs to hire people, to crowdsourcing, and then it become public goods, and the government can open source for Thai developer to improve the AI industry.
Now, as far as you can see, do you think the government has plans really to cope with the post-COVID-19 situation, especially in areas of dealing with the massive unemployment and the economy in general?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear the last part.
I think as far as you can see, do you think the government has plans ready to cope with the post-COVID-19 situation, especially in areas of unemployment and the economic problems that certainly will be very, very massive? Yeah.
I honestly have not seen any government having that forget the measure ready. I don't think any government actually have a very clear idea of how much problem this may impact the economy. We are looking at the working number of -5% to -15% of GDP across many countries, rich and poor. So in some way, this situation is far from over. A lot of people start to reopen economy with expectation that it's going to be some surge of some kind of this epidemic, and more that we learn about this. More and more that we learn about this pandemic is going to be a better prediction for the government to plan the policy.
Yeah.
It's not quite uplifting to see the world after COVID-19. Yeah. It seems Thailand still has to adjust a lot. So what do you like to
we are not bad. We are not bad indeed. But I certainly feel that what we have seen today are a lot of assumptions. There are assumptions that antibody is immunity, but these are at best assumptions. They're not fact. It's not based on data. We believe that the smaller number of infected person will lead to a smooth opening up of economy. These are assumptions. We don't know whether it's true. We have not seen it to be the case even in the countries that had these pandemics before we did, like China or Korea. So everyone has to still be on vigilance. And even after vaccine has been predicted to come out next year or 2 years from now. So the prediction is still widely estimated.
I see. The whole thing, of course, is not yet over. But I'm sure that the economists like yourself always look ahead. But so looking forward, do you foresee any areas in which you yourself and your organization will do things differently in the aftermath of the pandemic?
Oh, I see it. I think tech will change. The technology and also society will change in so many different ways after COVID. And we certainly see the pattern of work has been affected, has shifted permanently. Now employers realize that people can work away from office. Employees will also demand better work-life balance, and office are there for collaborative work only. So we're going to see a big shift from the demand 9 to 5, 5 days a week schedule into something that's much different, even after the vaccines emerge into the scene. The commuting pattern will change. Urbanizations will need to be redesigned. Structure of city will also change, be it public space, public transportation, school and nightlife. That will return in a way that wasn't discussed or even considered previously. And we will see a new kind of inequality, which will be widened between those owning technology and those owning data, gaining much more market power. And then we'll see more traditional businesses that cannot adjust quickly enough sort of fade into the background. Dr. Nathan mentioned early on that now that nearly everyone is forced online, either from work or from contract tracing application in order to resume economic activities, we'll see digital inequality rising. And a consumer without digital literacy will be prone to identity theft and or abuse of private information. So when you ask, what kind of business is going to be in search, I think cybersecurity is going to be a big winner of the day. And I severely believe that as financial literacy, as important as digital literacy, letting people know their rights, having proper cyber hygiene is important. It's public goods and the government should provide it.
The issue of cyber hygiene is really crucial, Dr. Sutapa, especially at this juncture that the government has planned to launch Thailand Victory or Thai Chana application.
Right.
And the issue must be quite concerning in terms of big data and personal privacy. So what's your take on this issue, and how should Thai people, or what should Thai people be aware of?
I think we have seen many different models outside of Thailand. Examples as in China, Taiwan, South Korea. They have launched an early version of these applications, but they are in some way very invasive. Singapore decided on a different path. They launched their Trace Together much early on, but the adoption has been quite low. So end of the day, these systems cannot be effective. And I would not discussing about Thai Chana or Moshana specifically, but let me discuss in general trend what we have observed. So these systems cannot be effective if people do not trust them. And people will only trust them if it protects their privacy. So I would say the minimal requirement would be that the data is not kept in some kind of centralized repository. It needs to be kept on device only. Only government health officials can access those data. All applications must get user consent, and also the second user consent when it's required to share COVID test result. And the data collection must be very minimal or minimized, and other use of data are explicitly banned, not for target advertising or for policing. And it's a very it can hit at the very fundamental of the design of this device. They have to understand that if they choose between control and collaboration, if they choose the first, they may not get any. But if they choose the latter, there's a good chance that they get both. So in a way, I do hope that when it comes out, it's also think about trust as the major key success factor.
No, but what we heard today from the authorities' concerns was more about the application itself, but less on the assurance that the people's privacy would be protected. I think that would certainly raise an issue of trust among the people on this application.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think when they force people to use that in order to resume economic activity, they need to convince people.
Yeah.
That and they need to educate people when you force people to only use Thai language as official language, they need to teach Thai in school. And in some way, I hope that they do realize that they are forcing a lot of people who've never been on digital platform to be on digital platform. And therefore, they need to teach digitization, they need to teach privacy rights, they need to teach the cyber hygiene, etiquette on social media, on digital platform. And this needs to be done alongside the adoption of these technologies, not after.
Yeah. But I ask you frankly, the next time you drop by your favorite beauty salon, would you feel comfortable using your mobile phone to scan the QR code in front of the premises?
I'm still waiting to visit my favorite beauty salon. It has been so long, I think I have forgotten about them. But I will be. As long as I know that the data collected from me will be kept for my best interest, it will be collected minimally, and it will be used only for the intended consented agreement for me.
But how do we know that the data won't be manipulated? How can ordinary people know?
That's why the education is very important. But I think the more important is they need to be explicit when writing down. There are many tiers of technologies that they can choose to make it much more secure and much more private. And for example, if the data is kept in the device and is can only be reviewed not through national ID, not through identity, but from the device number, for example. A lot of these a lot of identity can be protected. The civil rights can be protected much more. And I think it's the duty of those enforcing citizens to use it, to actually educate them of what's being collected, why it's being collected, who's get to use them, what's the governance structure.
Yeah.